All right, it looks like we are live. Welcome everyone to another Monday of Overflow, where we break down, talk about the sermon a little more from yesterday. And I'm here with Senior Pastor Juno Smalley. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Student Ministries Pastor Ryan Bogert. Our other regulars, Ryan Clement and Aaron Wood, are not able to join us today. They have family things they are dealing with. But so the two of us will be taking it on today. And as always, if you're joining us live, please leave a question, a comment, a thought in the chat, YouTube chat on the side, because we do these for you guys, not for ourselves. And we love to hear from you, and we love to engage with you. And when we get questions, that's what makes these overflows the best they can be. So yeah. So Juno preached yesterday. Juno, do you want to go ahead and give a short summary of your sermon?
Yep, and I'll center in on that word short, Ryan. Again, we're at Luke 6 verses 43 to 45, and it is a classic passage where Jesus takes an object lesson from the world in which they live, and it's really one on horticulture and on trees, and it's pretty simple. If the tree is good, then the fruit can't be bad. And if the tree is bad, the fruit is going to be no good. And so that really is it. And taking a step larger, it's a reminder that it really does everything focuses back to our heart and where our heart is. And then toward the end, I just talk about the farmers in California who grew these, I think they're called Lady Lucky peaches. But those just, a great fruit, award winning. I mean, they're making bank off that peach, but that just doesn't happen. And as we follow Jesus, following him, having our fruit be the type that people want to come to, it just doesn't happen. It takes work. It takes hard work, and it takes a refusal to compromise. So that's roughly it.
All right. Well, the first icebreaker question for today, just to get off on a lighter note, is what is your favorite type of fruit? Juno, what is your favorite type of fruit?
Oh, it's either going to be watermelon. I got to go to either watermelon or cherries.
Oh,
Cherries, some good cherries. Oh, they are just so wonderful. But after writing this sermon, I could have gone for a good old peach. But anyway, all right.
There you go. Yeah, cherries are very good. Good cherries are very good. I'm not as big a watermelon fan. I'd say my favorite fruit are probably like really juicy strawberries. Just
chocolate covered.
Yeah. Oh well, yes. That's a whole other category. I do love chocolate covered strawberries, which Juno knows. But I mean, my favorite fruit would just be regular strawberries. Eaten quickly and juicy when they're juicy when they just have the right amount of ripeness, because it could be overripe or under not ripe enough, but right when it's in the perfect sweet spot. Oh man, strawberries are delicious. There's a lot of fruits that's like they're so delicious when they're right in the sweet spot, but if you have them a day too early or a couple days too early, a couple days too late, it's like not very good.
Yep.
Kind
of my favorite desserts. Okay. One of my favorite desserts would be any fruit on vanilla ice cream.
Oh yeah.
Could be peaches, could be strawberries. At our wedding rehearsal, we had strawberries on ice cream. So there's just something about where it's the fruit and the ice cream. Anyway, ice cream. So I just thought about that as you were talking.
Oh yeah. Well, I love vanilla ice cream with strawberries in them. Yes. So I know
you just can't beat it. Oh,
it is very good. Okay. Very good. All right, but enough on that. Anyways, yeah. So diving into the questions, we always go through the questions in the New Life app, and that's because some of you who watch are small group leaders, and us talking about the questions may give you ideas about how to lead or facilitate this conversation with your small group. So, question number 1 says, it talks about how self-deception is when we believe something about ourselves that's not true. For all of us, there are things that we believe to be true about us, but are not always or not really true. For example, like we think we're really honest people. We always try to be honest, but there are ways maybe where we tell little white lies or where we're dishonest at times. And following Jesus, the challenge of it is about having integrity and making sure that our lives are consistent with our beliefs. So take a few moments to share what your core are some of your core beliefs about what sort of characteristics we ought to have as Christ followers. So what are the most important characteristics that we are to have as followers of Christ that people will know us by our fruit? Juno, what do you think are some of the most important that jump to your mind immediately?
Well, since I wrote the sermon, I'm going to say love, but I don't know. Love isn't a fruit. But anyway, but I
Well,
do
it's one
think
of the fruits of the spirit, right? Love, joy,
love,
peace.
joy, peace. Yeah. Okay. Correct. Yes. Yep. But not a fruit in our own world here. Okay. I would say, even as you interact with non-believers or people who have been deeply hurt by the church, as we know, study after study will tell us that people just didn't feel loved. And so I just feel, I touched on it a little bit yesterday toward the end of the sermon, that we're called, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. There's no qualifiers for that love. It's not based on sexual identity. It's not, in our culture here, it's not based on who you vote for, who you didn't vote for, not based on where you live, what you drive, what you wear. I joked about, it's not based on if you like Popeyes sandwiches.
Yeah, that's a big one for Juno, for those who are listening.
Hey. Somebody did email me yesterday after the sermon and say, hey, we just went to Popeyes and it is a great chicken sandwich. So at least my sermons are having some impact. And so anyway, yeah, I just think you know what, it just sounds so simple, but it really does. As we relate to non-believers, I think love is huge. And I also think an attitude of not forgiveness, but really a non-judgmental spirit.
I see. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I do want to say real quick, I'm multitasking. I just checked the chat. Welcome, Bill and Marion. It's good to have you guys. Marion said her favorite fruit is peaches, but she hasn't found one as juicy as the one you described in the service, So
we'll have to go look for those.
Yeah, for sure. But I think for me, I would agree. Like, I think it's wrapped up. Jesus summarizes all the law by saying, love God and love neighbor, and that's really the 101. It really starts with that in a sense. It's everything has to start with loving others. Like, I don't think you can be a deeply forgiving person. Well, let me think about how I phrase that. I think it's hard to be a deeply forgiving person to all those around you if you're not loving all those around you. Like, oh, can I be a forgiving person without loving other people? Like, so everything flows out of love. And I just really think that's where it starts. And I also, I like what you just said, about it's not based on any qualities, like you talked about political affiliation, things like that, because Jesus' challenge is to love all, to love your enemies, to love everyone around you no matter what, and show love no matter what. And that's really hard and countercultural, and it's also against our own instincts. It's really easy to love our friends and love our family, which everyone does, as Jesus talks about, but it's really hard to maybe love those who
love those who had a different to love those who had a different sign on their front yard than you do.
Yeah.
And who to vote for. Because
Yeah.
all of a sudden, how many people are you thinking, oh, he's a so-and-so lover?
Yeah.
Forget them.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with them. It's like, it's a sign. And yet we are putting people in a box. So.
Yes, there is certainly a big way this addresses our current political climate, how divisive things are. And that's, I think, being a Christian and loving is rising above that. I mean, I think there's still a point where we have to recognize we do. Okay, I know I'm not going to go there. Never mind.
But hey, let me pause again, interrupt. I'm sorry.
No
but
problem.
Again, this goes back to our next series about emotionally healthy relationships. I mean, folks, what a great opportunity to learn probably even more about loving one another and how to do that in ways so that the lost will think something's different about her, something's different about him. And that will come back to our love of Jesus and how Jesus has changed us to be less critical, less damning of other people, less putting people in a box. But anyway.
Yeah, and so this is a for me the toughest challenge of loving others is we are supposed to live like Jesus, right? And I challenge myself by measuring myself against Jesus, who, while being crucified on the cross, was praying for forgiveness for his murderers. And I
Mm,
just think, if I was being currently murdered, would I be praying for the people murdering me?
yeah.
And the answer that's probably not. And but the challenge is like that's the type of really radical love we're going to show, because I think it's like, oh, love other people, sure, be nice to people, but Jesus just takes it such a crazy degree of how challenging that is by praying for the people that are killing him, to like that's the type of love we are to show.
Yep.
So I don't think that means we never have a backbone or never take a stand against anything. But it is like showing radical love to everyone no matter what.
And I think it goes back again to our passage, chapter 6. I encourage people to read in the message sermon yesterday. But there's a lot of pretty high set expectations about loving our neighbors uh, and all, loving your enemies. It's like, oh, do you really need to? And we talked as pastors about, you know, uh, we've been called to a different level. You know, there are different expectations for believers, and so anyway. Chapter 6 is a reminder that it's tough, and our verses remind us that it's really where our heart's at, and then there's our fruit, but it just doesn't happen. But anyway, okay.
Yeah, for sure. So, um, if there was another, so the question asks us to try to think of three different core beliefs and share them with the group. So I think we both agree everything starts with love. So after love, would you say what is like maybe one more really core um, belief or characteristic, or more like characteristic, that we ought to be displaying as Christ followers that we really need?
Uh, Probably patience.
Hmm.
Patience with one another, patience that I take the time to listen to you, Ryan, to
Mhm.
understand where you're coming from, so that I don't go off the deep end and make some judgments or treat you differently. And even here in good old LA, driving around, it's just like patience.
That's an exercise in patience right there.
Gosh, and even in the checkout lines. I mean, it's just been one of a couple of weeks ago. It's just like my mind kept going to not good places with the way people were driving, the way people were in the grocery lines and just putzing around, taking up the whole aisle. Anyway, I was not patient, but then I thought about the sermon. I talked about to allow extra time,
Mhm.
to slow the pace down so I'm not just running around and then I got to go, 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 go. Anyway, so maybe it's more of a confession that I probably need more patience.
Yeah, well, I agree that it's a big one because it affects how we carry ourselves and act on a day-to-day basis, and that then affects how we treat others. Because if we're impatient and frustrated in the checkout line, then we get to the cashier and maybe we're kind of angry and have a bad attitude, and that goes to like how we love people every day. Um, I had another thought. This is something that one of my professors said at Fuller. He talked about how that commandment to love God and love neighbor, it's he argued that it's if you're not loving your neighbor in your
Mm-hmm.
actions, like in your daily life, then it's that is an expression of how we love God, because God commands us to love our neighbors. So if we're not loving our neighbor, then we're not loving God. So I think it's also important to note how inseparable those two are, and that's why also you mentioned earlier talking about not judging others. And I think that's just, another piece of how we love other people is by being slow to judge, and not judging or condemning them, but wanting what's best for them. And I think for me, I would challenge Christians, like, for example, just given the political divides in this country, to pray for people, leaders on both sides of the aisle, and especially the side of the aisle that doesn't agree with you. Pray for them and pray that they lead well and that God works through them and works in their heart and leads them to follow Jesus more closely. And that's because I think that'll help diffuse a lot of the anger that maybe we tend to have because of politics and because of disagreements and stuff like that. So, anyways, and that's really kind of, I feel like, reached a fever pitch in recent years of how
Yeah.
divided and angry people are. But, anyways, that's a whole nother thing. So, yeah, um, I think I'll share one more since I've pretty much just said love. I think for me, another one is having joy, and joy in all situations of life. And what I mean by that is really just having a sense of faith and stability and anchoring yourself in God, so that like no matter what happens in life, we're not too rocked. I mean, I think we can all go through really hard times and express that. I think that's okay. However, even going through the hard times and maybe being emotional with it, but recognizing the goodness of God and recognizing that God has been there for you before and will be there for you again, and not letting and therefore being able to like going through hard times talk about that. I think one of the most powerful kind of examples of that was actually a video you showed, I think, Juno, in one of your sermons a while ago. There was a woman who had her son murdered, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the murderer became her neighbor and they became
Neighbor.
really
Yes.
good friends. Like, how could someone's heart allow for them to do that without the love of Jesus Christ? I don't think it could. Like that's I don't know if I could do that. That's such an overwhelming example of like someone whose faith is anchored in Jesus and has a certain joy about them to where they can overcome life's difficulties. I mean,
Mhm.
not that obviously when those terrible things happen, you'll go through really hard times, but at the end of the day, finding that joy and being anchored in Jesus. So, anyways, that's one for me that I think can be really big. Um, so the next question is now reflect honestly on your life. Do you live these out? The main things that we just talked about. How do you live them out? And how do those show up in your life?
So you're asking me that?
Yes, I am.
I think the advantage or the would be the consequence. The consequence of me living so close to the church and then being the pastor is that uh, I am noticing that how I respond to the person at the bank or the checkout person, uh, uh, the people I come in contact with, uh, I'm much more cautious because at times I'm not patient. It's like, come on, folks, learn your job. If you knew your job, this line wouldn't be this long. Or, I can come up with 100 reasons why I think they're not doing what they should be doing. But so to your question, to answer to your question, to be, uh, I don't want. It's easier said than done, but it's sort of like going back to the sermon. To grow this fruit just doesn't happen. It takes energy. It takes intentionality. It takes a lot of people pouring into my life to help me to be patient.
Mhm.
Uh, and so uh, I don't know if that answers your question for you.
No, I think it gets to the like we're pastors, me and you. We
Mm-hmm.
we supposedly should be. I mean, some would say we should be better at this than anyone, but I really, in thinking about this question, like how do I live these out? It's easy. I find it easy to recognize that how hard this is and how I fall short. And I think there are times where it's really easy to get frustrated with people and not have the kind of patience that you talked about. Like, as a pastor, whether it's getting frustrated with, high school or junior high students who might be kind of acting out sometimes, or getting frustrated with, even people maybe like a youth leader who maybe does or says something they really shouldn't have done or said at youth group or something like that. But the point just being like, this is a constant challenge that really is a daily struggle. It's a daily, almost minute by minute struggle. And even like in my marriage to Sarah, how do I respond as a husband in a loving way? Am I being a man and a husband of patience? Am I being a man and a husband of like love, where I'm responding with love in all the times I interact with her? And she'll be the first to tell you no, that there are times where I don't. Um, and it's hard to live this out on a day-to-day basis. And that's why I think like the problem of sin is so deep and rooted in our hearts, where it's so easy to give in to impulses and frustrations and then, act in sin. Um, so I mean, I do my best. So how do I live these out? How do I think I live these out? I do my best. I do the best that I can, and yet I still fall short a lot, and that's the challenge, and that's the struggle. Um, and I think I think that'll be true of anyone answering this question. But I think the challenge is that it's being a living the Christian life and living like Jesus all the time as much as we can is just a constant battle. And it's very difficult. But if we commit ourselves to it, then that type of fruit will reflect in our lives, even though we're still imperfect. Having good fruit doesn't mean we're going to do everything perfectly or not sin, but that type of fruit will reflect itself in how we carry ourselves and conduct ourselves on a consistent basis, even though we'll still mess up at times.
Yes. Now, again, chapter 6 is so full of some great truths about our lifestyles and what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's all easier said than done. We've used the term often at New Life that it's a journey and it's a process. But I said yesterday, but we just can't get to it without community, because I think that helps. And a few Sunday, I don't know how long ago, months ago, we talked about again ways to help us love our enemy. I think that's what the sermon was really to slow down and to allow more space. And I think as we do that, then even with this sermon, it helps me to think through the more important causes in life, the more important issues in life, and to give me the patience to step into it. But even with our current situation, it's like, how do you stand up for justice, and how do you stand up for injustice to stop that? And at times, it doesn't mean I'm always going to be, or that we should be, just, oh, that's okay. Sometimes I do think there's a righteous anger that needs to occur, and probably a few things in churches that we've been too passive about.
Mm-hmm.
That needs to have a little bit of righteous anger thrown into there. So that doesn't mean, because all that to say is the fruit, the whole deal about fruit. That doesn't mean it's always the greatest looking peach or whatever, but that at times, even though it's a tree that's planted in good soil and that God is refreshing us, maybe God is calling us to lower the hammer on some injustices and abuses that are going on in our world. So, but that's probably another sermon I'll let you preach, Ryan.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just typing something into the chat. Just if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to leave them there, and that we can, we are always happy to discuss those. But I think that, yeah, I agree. There are times where we do need to have a certain righteous anger. I think the challenge is not making it angry or judgmental towards people. I don't think righteous anger should be judgmental or angry at a person in a way that is hateful. I think it can become hateful easily if you let it go too far. And I think it needs to be, in the interest of making things just and making things right. And not, like, I imagine that a lot of people in this country are really angry at politicians on both sides of the aisle, but if it ever goes to a point where it's like, oh, we should like hurt them or we need to get them fired, and it's like this kind of like hateful anger, I think then it's been taken too far. There could be a righteous anger of we need to write something about something that someone did that's wrong and we should write it, and that's good, and there's good to have righteous anger there, but it should never extend towards hate for a person. Although, I believe in laws and consequences for actions, but just not in a hateful or angry way at them. Anyways, so that's a whole other thing. But yeah. Anyways, I think we can do one more question. Have you ever been disappointed in someone else's character quality? So maybe someone you thought well of until you heard them say or saw them do something to show they lacked a type of character maybe you thought they had. So maybe someone you really looked up to, and then a time you were disappointed. Um, can you think of an example or a story of a time like that?
Yes, and it's not a one-off situation. They whatever they blew up at somebody or whatever. It's just a pattern all of a sudden I've seen in their life of
Hmm.
people that I highly respected, but yet there was there was not good fruit. Something was wrong in their heart, so to speak, that was causing them to consistently behave in ways that were extraordinarily not like Jesus, that were clearly nothing to do with the gospel. So I think what I've learned is that we all can, we all screw up. We all probably say some things we shouldn't at times, or behave in the one-off character thing that really wasn't me, or why did I blow up with that lady about this? And uh, it's just when there's a complete pattern of that. Oh, you don't have any kids yet. I have one, even though she's 27, she's still a child to me. Uh,
Hmm.
but it's just like, there are some parents who I look at them, it's just like, what is wrong? It's not that they just lost their patience once with their kid, but all the conversations are angst up, demeaning, devaluing, and it's just like, what's going on here? Anyway, so yeah, we all are human. We're going to make mistakes. It's just when I saw the pattern with this one person, then I was deeply disappointed, and
Right.
just almost to the point where disappointed and slipped into the disrespecting that person for the position they held and what they did.
Hmm. Yeah. I think for me, oh, sorry, I just got a notification. I think for me, I think recently I have been disappointed with certain leaders in the church who have seemed to place self interest. Hmm, I don't know how, and I don't mean this church. I mean the church in broad. Uh,
Thank you. I'm
yeah,
thinking, what did I do to Ryan?
yeah, no, no. Certain leaders. Hmm. I'm just, you know what? I'm just gonna go for it because I feel like I can't even talk about it if I don't go for it. And it may be a little controversial. And Juno, if I say anything wrong, you can help me correct it. But
Okay.
I've been disappointed, for example, with a certain John MacArthur and his response to the pandemic and the issues facing our world. And he's been like, California told him he can't meet, and they kept meeting anyways, indoors, mask optional, and to a point where it's like it feels like he's not caring for the people in his flock, and and risking their health to continue meeting. And I really like the approach that our church has taken towards it. And I think we've tried to conduct church in a safe way where we can still meet and gather. But I've just been disappointed in John MacArthur and what he's done at his church, just because, yeah, it's just, I think it's not showing wisdom and to deal with such a difficult situation that we're in this health crisis that we're in. So I'm disappointed in him and church leaders who are not valuing their people and keeping people safe. And some will respond to that and say like, oh, we need to, you know Jesus is the healer and we need to not worry about it. And I just don't think that's good theology personally.
Mhm.
Because like, oh, we should, like, that's like, to me that's almost similar theology to like, oh, don't go get cancer treatment, just pray for it. You don't need chemotherapy. As you
Mhm.
pray, Jesus can heal you. Because I believe that God has given us medicine, and God has given us stuff, sciences and the medicine and doctors, so that we can deal with these, and God can use them as instruments of his healing. So anyways, did I go too far?
Well, getting specific with Pastor MacArthur, I don't appreciate his view on women in leadership. I don't
Oh, that's a whole
appreciate
nother thing. I
his
wasn't even
view
gonna get
on the
into
Holy
that.
Spirit. And so him doing this just sort of adds fuel to the fire of, he's not a guy that I'd be following. Uh, But even going, let's just be real about where we're at with COVID. It's like there are still, I don't think we know what we're doing with it. I don't think anybody knows what it is for sure, because
Mhm.
none of the people that we trust, or not none, we're just not seeing a ton of consistent uh, opinions, evaluations, understanding, uh, for me to throw out everything the government says, even though at times I'm not sure the government's always as honest with us as they could be or should be. Uh,
Mhm.
and so since it's such a unknown entity, the whole virus thing,
Yeah.
well, we do know some, it's not completely unknown. I would much rather swing to the side of let's be cautious and let's be safe, uh, versus arrogant. Okay, that
Yeah.
probably shows my arrogant or whatever. And I know there are people in our church that think we should be inside every Sunday. And I know there are people that are very appreciative of what we're doing. And I know there are some who think we shouldn't even be meeting at all. Uh, and so it's like, so going back to this or any of our other messages about, learning to understand where they're coming from,
Mhm.
and to still appreciate them despite a difference of opinion.
Mhm.
And we don't even have to appreciate their opinion. I don't think we do. I'll,
Yeah.
I'll process that.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah. Go
give
ahead.
them give them the freedom to have their opinion, which they are completely entitled to.
Yeah, and I again, where we've landed in doing church outdoors, I think is a really happy middle ground where we are being safe and it is relatively very low risk. I mean, the state of
Mm,
California has regulations and rules, and they allow us to meet because they believe our gathering is safe. That's
yes.
LA County, that's the state of California. That's not just us.
Yeah.
So we're able to gather, but I think if we gathered indoors without masks, I think that would be irresponsible in our current climate.
Yeah.
And as far as you mentioned, John MacArthur disagreeing. There are other theological disagreements I might have with John MacArthur, sure, but I think this is more than a theological disagreement because this is about caring for his flock and putting them at risk unnecessarily. And it's not, how to respond to COVID, I don't think is like a theological disagreement. I think it's just a way we need to respond to be responsible leaders.
Yeah.
And I think he's not being a responsible leader in this context. So, anyways,
Okay.
so I just want to say,
How those tigers doing now? Okay.
yeah, I just want to say, for those of you listening, like, I'm not saying John MacArthur is all bad or everything he does is all bad. I just, how he's responded to the COVID-19 crisis specifically has disappointed me. And I thought that he would have more wisdom because there are certain things, as a theologian, there's certain things John MacArthur has said that, I don't, that I agree with and some things I disagree with. And that's a whole different thing than being responsible in this context, in this crisis. Anyways, so sorry. If I stepped on your toes, feel free to email me and let me know if you did. I always love a good conversation. Anyways, sorry to get into all that, but it
You're
was
fine.
just something that I thought of that came up in response to this question that was asked. But
Sure.
anyways, it's 12:34. Juno, do you have any final thoughts you want to wrap us up on?
It's that while I think the Lord picked a very real and tangible story, about the object lesson with the tree. These are people that work the land. They know how to farm, and yet it's just there's nothing magical though. There's nothing that guarantees the good fruit, and so the tree takes some work, and we need to. It's a journey. It's for all of us, and it's interesting. Even a tree goes through seasons, and so we do as well. And I just think we need other people to help us
Mm-hmm.
produce good fruit, whether it's for the fertile to teach us. If you look at the whole farming thing, about grafting the trees, about fertilizing the trees, about pruning the trees, about the soil for the trees. It's not just throwing a tree and you get a wham bam, you got this great peach or whatever, cherry or strawberry. No, strawberry would be the ground, but it takes energy. And I think our faith, our spiritual development takes energy and intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And and to know that that's a journey, and it's a journey that hopefully many of our folks will step into next month again with others as we talk about emotionally healthy lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Marion commented in response to our discussion about church. She said, "I for one appreciate the privileges of meeting outdoors. I am also one who don't feel ready to go inside." So I agree. I think we're in a good spot,
Yep.
and we appreciate that affirmation, Marion.
Thank you.
I think it's good that we get to meet. I think meeting online only, for me at least, if people need to meet online and can only come online, I think that's totally fine. However, I just like that we offer a safe option. And I think meeting outdoors is a safe option, and I like it. And I like that we get to do that. I think it's good for our community.
So to those who are listening from our church, just continue to pray as we process and analyze this way too often, probably. You know, it is a huge amount of energy to think through, pray through, to figure out what's the best way to lead the people really for this week, you know, because we're not making a decision for the rest of the winter, but it's really a week by week decision. So
Yes, absolutely. And I will say, this isn't just a decision that Juno makes arbitrarily. Like, this is a decision we make as a whole staff, you know, different people inputting their thoughts and, talking about the implications and the timing and where we're at in terms of COVID. And, this is a decision that many people consult with and make together. I mean, Juno's ultimately the head of that decision making process,
I
but
can
we all
veto
make
I
it
can
together.
veto anything I want. So,
Yeah.
but
He
since I
reserves the
agree
veto
with it,
power.
I'll let it ride.
Yeah. So, anyways, uh,
Okay.
yeah. Alrighty. Well, I think that should wrap us up for Overflow today. Thank you for coming as always, and thank you for letting us know you're here and sharing your thoughts. Um, and yeah, if you have any other thoughts or questions or issues with anything that was said today, you can always reach out to us and find our emails at the website, on our church website, nl-cc.org. All right. Well, thanks for coming, everyone. We hope you have a good week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and God bless you, everyone. Have a good Monday.
Take care.